All right. So hi class and welcome back. This is week 4 and I just wanted to take a moment to recognize each and every one of you. Um, you've already made it through more than half of the course and I know that most of you have other things going on like school and homework, and maybe some of you have some extracurriculars, maybe you're playing sports. Um, but despite all that, you're still here, and I think that's a very cool thing. It's admirable, and it shows that you have good work ethic. And then you have the strong will to learn JavaScript and coding and technology, which is a very, very high in demand skill in the world, and it has been for a while now. Okay, there we go. So let's go ahead and get started here. So this is week 4, JavaScript, code your first game, of course. And today we're going to go over functions, introduction to events, setInterval, and setTimeout. So the first thing we're going to go over here is functions. And a way to explain functions is it's just a reusable, think of it as reusable blocks of code. So they perform a specific task and you can quote unquote call or use them as many times as needed. So you're basically designing or coding a specific task, and then whenever you need it in your program, you just call it. And by calling, it just means that you're using it basically. And to do that, if you take a look at the code here, to declare a function, you're going to use the function keyword. So that's pretty simple, right? It's just function. You're going to write that. And then right after the keyword, you're going to name your function. And of course, you're going to follow the camel case convention. And one good habit to use when you're naming your functions is to start it with a verb. So kind of like what I did here. Function get random number, right? So get is the first word. And the reason why is because it makes it more clear what the function is doing or what you're trying to do. So it'll help yourself and others that may look at your code. And then after the name, you're going to add enclosed parentheses. So just a left parentheses and a right parentheses. After that, you're going to add your code in curly braces or curly brackets. And then after that, you have your function. And some functions, so there's 2 ways you can use them. They can return a value, or they can just perform a specific task without returning a value. And that's what I'm doing up here. And that's used with the keyword return. So in this function here, I'm basically just creating a random number and storing it in a variable, which you guys are familiar with. And then I'm just returning that random number. So random number is the variable, and then I'm returning random number. So every time that I call get random number, it's going to give me a random whole number between 1 and 10. And yeah, so I wanted to just do a quick demo on functions to show you when they're useful, why use them. So let's go ahead and do that. Type in Replit. So you're more than welcome to follow along if you'd like. And I'm just going to go here, go to my repls, and let's just create a new one. I'm going to call it HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then we'll just call this functions. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to head over to my script.javascript file. So for example, let's say I wanted to create 6 different random numbers, right? So if I wanted to create them, then I would store them in variables. So I'm going to write let, and I'm just going to call this random number 1. And to get a random number, if you remember, I'm going to floor a random number using the floor and the random methods. And then I'm going to multiply. Let's say I wanted to make it 1 through 10, a random number between 1 and 10. And let's exclude the 0. So I'll multiply by 10, add the 1. All right, great. So now I have my first random number. Now let's go ahead and let's do a second random number, right? We'll call this random number 2. Okay, now here we go. Math.floor, math.random, multiply by 10, add the 1. Great. Now let's do a random number 3. Do you see how this is starting to get a little tedious and a little repetitive? So with functions, that's what we're going to avoid. We're going to avoid, repeating ourselves and kind of doing this over and over again, right? So in reality, I would just grab this and then copy and paste it, and then just rename these. And if you look at this code, it's just very, it's all the same thing. And I think maybe in week 1, I think I might have mentioned an acronym that kind of gets thrown around in the coding world, and it's called the DRY principle. And it's just like that, the DRY principle. And what it stands for is don't repeat yourself. And that's what we're trying to avoid here is we don't want to keep repeating ourselves and writing the same code. So instead, we can actually go about this a different way and use some of the things that we've learned in the course so far. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a function. And again, Paul Minnow, how do we declare a function? Paul, are you there?
Sorry, my Zoom didn't let me unmute.
Oh, that's okay. So how do we declare a function? What keyword do we use?
Was it? I think it was. Was it the um the? It wasn't the let one because that didn't.
So let's for a variable, but if we wanted
I
to
know
create a function, right, we would use the, starts with an F.
the function.
Yep, exactly. Good job.
Because I thought like we're using the different one.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, you got it. So we're gonna create a
Because
function.
like I think I heard some people say there was like different ways how to like write the code, like the variable, the let, and then
Oh yeah, yeah. What you guys will find is in computer science, there's many different ways to do the same thing. It's kind of just up to you to preference or what's accepted mostly in the industry. So, if you have another way to do it, then yeah, by all means, if you like the other way. But I just wanted to show you this because this is kind of like the simplest way to create a function. So for this function, I just want to create 6 random numbers. So let's call this create 6 random numbers. And then I'm going to include my parentheses and then my curly braces. Now, what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to use a for loop. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of run through this. But if you remember, we're going to create a variable. We're going to call it I, and that's going to be the counter. And we want 6 random numbers. So I'm going to set the condition to I is less than 6. And then we're going to increment the I each time. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this code up here where we created the, oh, sorry, can you guys see that, by the way? Here, is that better? All right. And then I'm going to grab that code and then I'm just going to paste it in here. And actually we can just comment this code out now because we don't need it anymore. Let's do that. You just use the / star / to comment out a block of code. And then I'm just going to call this random. And what I'm going to want to do for these numbers is I'm going to want to store them in an array. So let's call this random number array. And if you remember, we're going to use curly brackets to, or I'm sorry, square brackets to declare the array. And then what I'm going to do now that I have my array and my function and my for loop is each time this for loop cycles or iterates, I'm going to store this random number in the array. And to do that, I have random number array, and then I'm going to use I, right? So each time we're going through this loop, I is iterating. So the first time it goes through, I is 0, then I is 1, then I is 2. And then I'm going to set that equal to random. And now let's just print it to the console, the numbers, just to be sure that they are storing. And then lastly, we want to call the function. So to call it, all you have to do is just write the name of the function and then with the parentheses. So let's write create 6 random numbers. IntelliSense will show up for us. And then that's it. So let's go ahead and run it and see if it works. And voila, as you can see, we get 6 random numbers, 3, 4, 6, 2, 5, 1. So do you see how this code is much better and less repetitive than this code up here? So that's how functions can be very, very useful. So now every time I need 6 random numbers, I just call it, right? I just call create 6 random numbers and it'll generate it for me because of the function that I created. All right. So let's go ahead and let's get back to the PowerPoint. All right, so next up we have what are called events. Events are just used to do something or create a reaction based on what the user does. So when the user opens up your website, they're interacting with it, whether they're pressing a login button or even on an iPhone, so the touch screen. Anybody here have an iPhone? Yeah. So I have an iPhone, and when I'm using it and I'm opening up apps, they're all about gestures, right? All about how you touch the screen to do certain functions. So I put this little animation here as an example. So like say if you wanted to zoom in on something, usually you would use 2 fingers and then kind of do this motion here, and it'll zoom in for you. And those are events, right? So that's you're doing something on the screen and specific code is being ran to do something. So the screen is recognizing that you're using that gesture and it says, okay, hey, the user wants to zoom in on this, on what they're looking at. Or if you're on a website or like Facebook or some social network, almost they all have login screens. So when you're putting in your your username and your password, and then you press login, it's logging you in. That's an event. It's saying, okay, when the user presses this button, do something, log them into their page and take them to their account, basically. And in JavaScript, when we want to use events, we just use the add event listener, right? And it's like this. And as you can see, look at the naming convention. It's camel case. So add event listener, and it even has a verb as the first word. So that's the method you're going to use to create events. And if you look at the code down here, this is what it looks like. So say if we wanted to grab a button that's on our HTML page, say we named it button. As you guys know, you would use document.getElementById, and then write the name of the button. And then here you're going to do .add event listener. And there's different types of event listeners. There's click, mouse over, mouse out, but we're going to focus on click because that's what you're going to use for the final project. So I wanted to show you guys this here. And to write it, you're going to code click in double quotations or single quotations, whichever one you use. And then separated by a comma, you're going to put in the function keyword. And this is where you're going to write your code for the add event listener. So if I were creating a login button and I wanted the site to take the user to their account when they press login, this is where I'd write the code to do that. So I'd say, take user to account page. All right. And yeah, the demo today will include events. So you will see that in action. Anybody have any questions on that so far? Annabelle?
Say when you're playing the game, when you hit the mole, it makes you go to the next one, like the next characters that come out. And if you click the wrong character, it makes you start over. Would you be able to do it with events?
Exactly. That's a very good observation, actually. So for the final project, if you want to, for example, for my final project, when I clicked on, if you guys remember, when I clicked on like Mario or Peach, it would give like a coin sound. And if I clicked on the mole, it'd go art, and that's events. So I'm using events to do that. I would basically write, document.getElementById Mario, add event listener, and then I'm writing, okay, if Mario is clicked, then play this sound, and then increase the score by 10 points. So yeah, the final project, that's how it's using events. Good question. Any other questions? All right, so let's move forward. Okay, so the setInterval method. Just to keep it simple, you're going to use the setInterval method to continuously call a function between specified delays. So we already went over a function. You guys know what a function is. Basically, all we're doing with setInterval is we are running that function and then waiting a certain amount of time and then running it again, waiting a certain amount of time, running it again, just continuously. And in this example here, this is how you're going to use the setInterval method. So you're embedding everything within a parentheses, as you can see here. So you're embedding the function, and then this 500 here is actually the interval time. So that's what you're using to specify how long it's supposed to wait until it runs the function. And just keep in mind that this number is in milliseconds. So for example, there's 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. So just keep that in mind when you're coding your set intervals. And then all of that is tied together or encapsulated between the parentheses, as you can see here. And then, don't forget your semicolon as well. And then the function, of course, is in curly brackets. All right. Any questions on set interval? Annabelle?
I was just wondering, like, say you press the correct character, like the mole, would you use this to like set the time until you get the next characters that come out and you have to click the mole again?
Yeah. So with the set interval, with the whack-a-mole game, do you remember how they the images switch randomly? So to do that on a timely manner, you're going to use set interval to do that. And the 500 that I wrote here, you can think of that as the difficulty, right? So the lower that number is, the harder it's going to be to whack the mole. Because if I were to put, if I were to put this at 2,000, then I'd be giving the user 2 seconds every time to whack the mole, which is very easy. So you're going to see that'll be like your difficulty level.
So when like the mole pops up, you get the number is how many seconds you get to hit that mole.
Exactly. Any other questions? All right.
Mr. Ramirez, I also have a question as well.
Yeah.
So like could this like method also like since like we have the array method now, like so like the thing usually this usually determines like how many seconds or does like the user have to like maybe like click on the mole, and then for my code I could just say how many seconds, like how long does like how long does like my background song like repeat it before like it I'm not sure. Yeah, something similar to that.
Yeah. So it's gonna be up to you, right? So I'll let you guys when you create your final project, I'll let you guys set that number to whatever you like. It's really whatever difficulty you want to put it at, and I'll show you too. It's probably best to store that number in a variable and then write the variable name there. That way it's easier to adjust, right? So you can keep the variable name at the top of your code, and then you just change the number, whenever you want. But yeah, that number is up to you. All right. Okay, and let's go over the set timeout method. So the set timeout method, try not to get it confused with set interval. The difference between set timeout is it calls a function or evaluates an expression after waiting a specified amount of time. So think of it like the pause button. You're just pressing pause on the program while it's running, and then executing it after the specified amount of time. So to write that, it's just set timeout. It's very, very similar to set interval. So less that you have to remember, right? So it's set timeout, and then you're going to embed your function just like set interval. And then you're going to separate it by a comma and then write in the amount of milliseconds or the amount of time that you want it to stop before it starts up again. And again, yeah, so 500, so it's in milliseconds, so 500, that is half a second. And that is it. Anybody have any questions on set timeout? No? Okay. All right. So we got a pretty hefty demo today. So I just wanted to make sure that we had enough time to do that. So I think, yeah, so I think that's it for the slides. So not too many slides today, but let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So let's get back at 5:40 and then we will start on the demo. So I'll see you here. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and let's jump right into the demo. So for this demo, we're going to use everything that you guys learned today. So functions, events, setInterval, and setTimeout. You'll see you can do a lot of cool things just with these skills. So let's go ahead and I'm going to open up my Replit. You're more than welcome to follow along if you like. And I'm going to create a new project. And I'll just create it here. That's fine. HTML, CSS, JS, of course. And I'm going to call this bird. And you'll see why. So for this assignment, I'm going to create a bird and I'm going to make it fly. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I need my images, right? So I'm going to need an image of the bird and then the background to make it more pleasing to look at, more exciting of a website. So let's go ahead and let's create a folder here. I like to just call mine IMG. It's simpler for when I'm writing the code to access the files. And then of course I have, I already have images ready. So I'm just going to grab these images and drag them into my file, just like that. And I'll go over where you guys can get the images you're going to need. So, oh yeah, one thing to mention, this demo is based on the coding assignment that is opening up on Google Classroom at 6 p.m. So if you need any help with the coding assignment, just refer back to this video recording if you need to clear anything up. So let's start with the easy stuff. Let's go ahead and give this a title. And instead of Replit, I'm just going to call it Flying Bird. And of course, just like the last assignment, right? So if I wanted to embed an image on my site, I'm going to have to add some code here in my HTML. So anybody want to give a guess? What tag are we going to use to embed an image? Anybody remember? Josephine? Yes, nice. Yes, we're going to use the span tag to do that. Yep. So, yep, we're going to use the span tag. Good job. And then now that we have the span tag, let's give it an ID. That way we can use it in our JavaScript. So let's give it an ID. We'll just call this, well, this is where the bird's going. So I'll just call this bird, just like that. So now that I have my span tag, let's go ahead and let's head over to our, let's do this. Let's just add the background. That's not too bad, right? So we'll just add that in there really quick. And if I wanted to add the background to take up the entire site, then I would use body. And then you guys might remember this from your HTML and CSS course. So background image, that's what I'm going to use. And then if I wanted to use a file of mine, then I would use URL. And to access that file, I'm going to want to go down the file hierarchy. So IMG, right? / and then the name of the file. So I have my 2 bird images, and then I have the this image here called sky, and that's what I'm going to use. So sky.jpg. Semicolon, and there we go. Let's see what we get so far. And yeah, so we have our nice animated background image. So let's keep going. Let's head over to our JavaScript file. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is for the JavaScript, again, we're going to use setTimeout, setInterval, and the idea here for setInterval is I have 2 images here, and I have the bird with the wings up and the bird with the wings down. And I'm going to use setInterval to make it appear as if this bird is flying, right? So like animations are sort of a series of images strung together. And here I'm going to use 2 to give it an animation effect. And that's what we're going to do here. So if I wanted to do that, let's start with setInterval. And now that I have setInterval, I'm going to want to use the function keyword like that. And then don't forget your curly brackets like that. Now, when you're doing the setInterval, it's very easy to forget, but just always remember to put your semicolon at the end like that. So if your setInterval is not working and you can't figure out why, just always check for that semicolon. And another cool thing you can do with setInterval is you can actually store this in a variable. So I could say let fly equals setInterval, right? But let's get to the code. So in order to access these images, I'm going to have to store them in an array. So for the array, the elements aren't going to change. They're going to remain the same. So which keyword? Anybody remember what keyword I'm going to use if the values aren't going to change? Paul, your screen's lighting up. I can't tell if you're talking or no. Oh, Josephine? Yep, exactly. We're going to use the const keyword. Thank you. So const, and let's just give this a appropriate name. This is holding the images of the birds that I have. So I'm just going to call it bird images. And I like to use IMG for short, bird images. So I'm going to go ahead and just run through this and grab the image files. And as you can see, I named one bird wings up and bird wings down. It just makes the most sense when you're looking at the image. So let's go ahead and let's get the bird wings up. And the file type, PNG. And now we want bird wings down. So I'm just going to copy that, save me some time. Change up to down. And now we have our array. So one thing to understand with these images is in order to give it the animation effect, I have to fluctuate between these 2 array elements. So I have to do it back and forth constantly. So I have to go to bird wings up, bird wings down, bird wings up, bird wings down to give it kind of a flapping motion. And one way to do that is using if-else statements, right? So to use if-else statements, we're also going to need a counter. And I know that might not make too much sense right now, but I promise you, after you look at the code, you'll say, oh, okay, I see why now. So the first thing we need to do, I'm just going to come here and create a variable, and I'm going to call it I. I'm going to set it equal to 0, or assign it the number 0. Now, what I'm going to do is come down here, and actually, I think I'm going to want to be up here. And basically what I'm going to say is if I is equal to 0, then I'm going to want to set I equal to 1. Right, and to do that, I can write this: I is equal to I plus 1, right? So if I comes through and it's 0, if you place 0 where the I is, then it's going to say 0 plus 1, and now I is equal to 1. And there's actually an easier way to do this. So I'm going to show this to you guys. So when you're writing your code and people see it, they're going to be like, oh, this person knows what they're doing. So an easier way to write that is like that. The plus symbol and the equal symbol right next to each other. And then I'm going to write else what if the number is 1, right? So I'm going to say if I is equal to 1, then we're going to set it back to 0, basically. So I'm going to follow the same code that I wrote here. And instead of plus, I'm going to use minus, like that. And all this code is doing is it's taking I, right? That's equal to 1. And it's subtracting 1 to make I equal to 0. And this code here, this is how we're going to fluctuate between these two elements constantly, right? With this code here. So let's go ahead and let's keep going here. So now what we want to do next is we need to grab the bird. We have to grab the picture of the bird. And remember, we named it, I think we named it bird. So let's go ahead and grab it and then store it in a variable, and we'll just call it bird as well. And of course, to do that, it's going to be document.get element by ID. And we named the span element bird, right? So if we come here, it's bird. So this is what we're grabbing here, is that span area. And then what I'm going to want to do is I need to place whatever array element it grabs. So whatever picture, the bird wings up or the bird wings down, I have to grab that image and then place it in the HTML. So I'm going to use inner HTML to do that. And then we have the, remember the complicated code that I showed you guys that I think it's next week we're going to go over in detail. I'm just going to grab that and then paste it in like that. And then lastly, for the set interval, we need a speed, right? So I can go in here and then I can separate the function with a comma, and then I can just put 500 or 1,000, whatever you like, right? For this, I'm going to say 400. That's probably a good speed. And remember when I talked about writing a variable, creating a variable, and then storing it here instead? So imagine you had 1,000 lines of code and you're debugging or troubleshooting someone else's code. And say maybe you just want to change the speed. You would have to cycle through all that code, come down here, and then take that number out and then change it. And that could be a pain when you're looking at 1,000 lines of code, right? So to get around this, what you want to do instead is at the top of the code, just create a variable. And I'm going to say let speed, I'm going to call it speed, equal to, we said 400, right? We're going to do 400. So now I can just type in speed, just like that. So if I'm looking at 1,000 lines of code and I just want to change the speed, I can just come here. I don't have to drill down every line of code. I can just say, I'm going to change this to 500, and it's much easier. So let's go ahead and run this and just see what we got so far. And there you go. So we have a flying bird, which I think is pretty cool, that you can do that with just images. So what we want to do next, we probably want to, spruce this up a little bit. Let's maybe like center the bird, over here more. So he's not all the way over here. So to do that, we can do CSS. So let's head over to our CSS. And in the body, I'm just going to align it. So I'm going to use text dot align and center. Let's run that again. And yeah, so now he's centered. So say I wanted to speed this bird up. I could come here and I can just put 100, run. And now he's running, now he's flying. He's going very fast. Or he can be a slow flyer. All right, so I can set the speed to 1,000. But I think, maybe 300 is a good speed. So there's a couple more things we can do. Let's add a button to stop the bird. And to do that, we're going to go back to our JavaScript here. And well, we actually have to embed the button first. So let's go ahead and embed the button, and we can do that in our HTML file. And I'm just going to put it right below the bird. So if you guys remember, we're going to use the button tag for a button. And let's give it an ID. And I said it's going to stop the bird from flying. So we'll just call it stop button. And we'll give it a type. And I'm going to call this a button. All right. And then actually, we might not need on click, but I'm going to put it there just in case. If we need it, then I'll explain it to you. Let's see. And then let's call it stop, like that. And then let's just design this button a little bit. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to grab the CSS code I already have here. I'm just going to paste it in. And I think we call this stop. So let's see if that button pops up. Okay, yeah. So we got the button there. And let's see, let's go back to our JavaScript file. And let's go ahead and let's just run through this really quick. So if I wanted to write the JavaScript to stop the bird, if you wanted to stop the set interval, because remember, it's running off the set interval. So what we have to do to stop it is use clear interval. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add an event listener, basically saying when that button is clicked, then clear the interval. And we're like running out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this for you guys. That way you guys can see it just like that. So document.getElementById, we call this stop though, stop button. I think I need to fix in my CSS code. Stop button. And we have add event listener. We're using the click. We're basically saying when that button is clicked, then clear the interval. Which interval are we clearing? We're clearing fly. And that's why I gave it a variable name and I called it fly. So let's go ahead and let's run this. Let's see what we get. Okay, so we got a nice stop button there. If I click on it, the bird should stop. And he does. So that's just an event. That's an example of event listeners. The button is listening for the user to click it. Once it clicks it, then it's running this code here. So clear interval. All right. And you know what? I ran out of time to show you guys setTimeout. If you guys want to leave, you're more than welcome to leave. But we have office hours from 6 to 6:30. So for anybody that wants to stay, I'm just going to go over the setTimeout and how you can use that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like, all right, we still have a full house. Everybody's still here. So yeah, let's go ahead and continue the demo here. So what I wanted to show you guys is setTimeout. So let's go ahead and let's run through that and see how we could use setTimeout. So let's say I wanted to tell this bird when to start flying, right? So when I'm running it and the site opens, he's already flying. And what if I wanted it to say, you know, ready, set, go, or ready, set, fly. And then once it says fly, then he starts flying. Well, then I would use setTimeout to do that. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So let's go ahead and let's start coding that. So I'm going to head over to my JavaScript file. And let's go ahead and let's do this. So when it says ready, set, fly, I want it to show up where the bird is. So I'm going to reuse the same span tag to do that. And I'm gonna, let me refresh this page so the bird stops flying. Actually, I could have just used the stop button I created. But yeah, so to put it in the span tag, again, I'm going to use document.getElementById to do that. And I'm just going to store the word ready. So let's go ahead and let's do that. And for the variable name, again, you want to use what makes the most sense. I think ready, set, fly makes the most sense. That's what I'm going to have it print or show up on the web page. So let's go ahead and write this out. Document.getElementById. And remember, we named the span tag, we named it bird. And to make it show up on the HTML page, we have to use inner HTML. And then I'm just going to set this equal to a string called ready, just like that. Now, what I could do is I could copy this and I can paste it like that. And then I could call this set and then call this fly. But the only problem is you're not going to really see it. You might see the ready. Yeah, so it's not even going to work because we're redeclaring the variable with the same name. So the way I'm imagining this, or the way that I want it to show up, is I want it to say ready, wait maybe about 1 second, and then say set, and wait another second, and then fly, kind of like a real race. And to do that, we're going to use setTimeout to kind of to give the program those pauses. So ready, that's the first thing that's going to pop up when the web page opens. So that's fine where it is. But I want it to wait 1 second after ready shows up before it shows set. So let's go ahead and let's take this variable and then let's encapsulate it in a setTimeout method. So let's go here. I'm going to write setTimeout, as you guys know, and then the function, and then the curly brackets, and then the semicolon at the end. And all I'm going to do is grab this, and then I'm going to paste it right there in the setTimeout. And I think I said I wanted to make it wait about 1 second. So that's going to be 1,000, which is 1,000 milliseconds. Yeah, 1,000 milliseconds. So the way to read this is, it's basically saying these 3 lines of code is saying wait 1,000 milliseconds before you run what's inside this function, right? Wait 1,000 milliseconds before you show the word set on the web page. And then I'm going to want to do the same thing for fly. So let's go ahead and let's run, or let's code setTimeout again, and then put this variable inside here. And actually, we can just grab fly and then paste it over set like that. Like that. Now here's something that is kind of, it doesn't work well with the timing. You'll notice when you're using setTimeout, you're gonna have to mess with these numbers to get it right. So let's run and let's see what we get. Do you see that? It was very fast, but it kind of just ran through. It said ready, set, fly. And the reason why is because we have to adjust these numbers here, and also because the bird, we have to think about the bird as well, because when that site opens, the bird is going to start immediately flying. So what we have to do, we also have to use a setTimeout on the bird to make sure that he doesn't start flying until fly, or until the word fly shows. So let's go ahead and let's turn this one maybe to 2,000. Let's make this one wait a little bit longer. And to make the bird, so if I wanted the bird to wait until fly shows up, then what I have to do is I have to take into consideration the amount of time the total amount of time that ready set fly is taking to finish. So let's do this. Let's take all of this and then let's encapsulate it in a setTimeout function. So I'm going to do that. setTimeout. Semicolon. And then now I'm going to grab this here, including the stop button. Let's just grab everything here. And let's put it in a setTimeout. I'm going to cut that. And remember, this is just so we can get the bird to wait before it starts flying. And let's go ahead and let's indent that a little bit. And let's say I want this bird to wait, let's make it 2,500 milliseconds. That should be enough to get it right. So what I would do is add 2,000 and then add 1,000 and I get 3,000, but I want it to be very accurate. So right when it says fly, then show up. And this is in milliseconds. So if I were to not use 3,000, instead use 2,500, it won't be that much of a, you won't really see the difference. But let's do 2,500. So now I'm almost ready to run this. Before I do though, before I forget, I want to show you guys an easier way to write this code. So you see how it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines just to write these if statements, which is pretty simple. There's actually an easier way to write it. And when you look at the code that I'm about to write, you're going to say, wow, that is very complicated. But I just wanted to show it to you guys. That way you guys know, and then you can just choose whichever way you want to use. So it's called ternary operators. And basically I can say, well, let me just write it and then I'll explain it to you. All right. So there's a line of code. Now, if you look at this code and then this code, what I can tell you is that they both do the same exact thing. And this, if you look at this, it's much cleaner, right? It looks much better than this because it's all just one line of code. So the way you want to read this, the question mark, think of it like it's asking the question, right? So if I were to say, what's your favorite food? And then we know it's a question because of the question mark here. So try to think of it in a similar way with these ternary operators. So with this question mark, it's basically asking, hey, is I equal to 0? Do you guys see that? So it's saying, is I equal to 0? And then what it's saying after is, if it is, then run this code. Else, if it's not, then run this code. So think of the colon as the else. So it's saying, this question mark, it's saying, hey, is I equal to 0? If it is, then set I equal to 1. Else, if it's not, then set I equal to 0. So I'm actually going to use that code instead of this. So I'm just going to comment that out. Like that. And then let's go ahead and just use this line of code instead. And that's pretty much it for the JavaScript. So let's go ahead and let's just style up our page. So let's go back to our CSS. And you guys may have noticed, did you see when I added this button, the bird actually moved? It used to be up here and now it's down here. And every time the bird's flapping, the button's moving. So we want to avoid that. We want to clean that up a bit. And to do that, what we want to use is position fixed. So let's go ahead and let's create a CSS, some CSS for the bird or the bird span. And I'm just going to say position fixed like that. And then if you remember, we're also going to have ready set fly in the same area as the bird. So let's go ahead and let's make sure that the font is legible or you can read it. So I'm just going to say font size. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's say 50 pixels. And for the color, let's just make it black for now. And now let's also use, you can use whatever kind of font you want. One of my favorite fonts is monospace. So I'm just going to use monospace. And I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead and run this and let's see what we get. Fly. And then it starts flying. So did you guys see that? So that's how, that's one way we can use the timeout method. So I just wanted to show you guys that. And I think that's actually extra credit on the coding assignment. So if you guys do that, I'll give you extra credit. And let me see here.
So I also have a other question. Like,
Yeah.
since like we had a fixed position, like, is it possible if you just use, instead of a fixed position, we could use a absolute position, and then we could just place the bird wherever we want? Since like when we did the fixed position, now it's kind of up a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So whatever, whatever the situation is with the site, whatever it is you're trying to do, if you wanted to use absolute instead of fixed for, to do something, then yeah, you can just use absolute, run it, and ready, set, fly. There we go. So as you can see, the bird's still going to be in the same spot. The button's not moving. So yeah, either way, whatever works best for your situation here. And let's make this a little more enthusiastic. I'm going to add an exclamation mark there at the end. And then let's try this again. So ready, set, fly. And now we've got the bird flying. And if I press the stop button, he should stop. And he does. So that's just what I wanted to show you guys. Make sure you see that set timeout method, especially if it's extra credit on the coding assignment. So anybody have any questions on anything? Josephine?
It's not something that required on this, but how do you, when when the bird flaps, how do you make it like go to the left side gradually?
So if you wanted it to go to the left side gradually, that would require a different set of animation libraries, which is another beast within itself. So you could actually use animations to set the pixels, and I can just put a button here. And then every time I click that button, I can say, I want you to move 10 pixels or 20 pixels. So if I were to press that button and hold on to it, then the bird would, it would start moving. But that's a ton of different code that I don't want to get into at the moment. I just wanted to kind of give you guys just a simple introduction to how you can manipulate images to give animation effects. But yeah, there's different ways, different animation libraries you can use. So he can fly to the left or fly right. And I highly recommend if you want to on the side, just do some research on the animation libraries. There's tons of stuff that you can on the internet that you can find for the animations. But this is kind of just a little intro. Anybody have any other questions?
Also, is like the ready set fly thing like one of the requirements? Like, could I like instead of like putting that, I could just like have a moving music like animation instead of like having ready set fly. So am I required to like put in the ready set fly part?
The ready set file, no, you're not required to put that in. I just put that part as extra credit. But actually, you guys just for some reason that just reminded me. Let me show you an area that you can go to get these images. So these images, I call them animation series images. So if I were to open up a new tab, there's a website you can go to for free pictures, and it's called Free Pick. Free Pick. And if I open that up, I can go here and I can just type in animation series images. And what you'll see is you'll get a series of images, but each image is them moving. It's a different, they're slightly in a different position. So you kind of just have to like look through and see what you can find. And then you're gonna also want to make sure that, because some of these aren't free, so you're gonna have to filter it. Let's accept cookies. And so I'm gonna click free here on the side. That way it gives me everything that is free. And let's type in, so up here, as you can see, let's click on this one right here. That way I can just show you guys. So you see how like this is a series of images, how the guy is in one position, then he's starting to run. So what you would do is download this picture, and then you would want to separate each image from itself. And to do that, one way is just a screenshot, right? Or use snipping tool to do it. So you want to use your snipping tool on one and then use your snipping tool on another. Not this picture precisely, but just a free picture that you find on Free Pick. Animation series images. Let's try that. Let's see if that pops up anything different. Animation. Let's find a different one. Okay, that's weird. Let's see. Let's try this. So yeah, so let's do this instead, just for the sake of showing you an example, because Free Pick is running a little slow right now. Series of images for animation. And you don't have to use Free Pick. You can use whatever you like. There's all sorts of free images on the internet, but yeah, here's a good one. So we have this frog, and it's running through a series of images here to kind of give it an animation effect, or this turtle here. So like, say if I wanted an animation of the turtle to jump, I would download this picture, use the snipping tool to grab this one and then grab this one of him jumping. And then I would run each of those images through the transparent background generator. So whether it's Adobe Spark or Remove BG, any one of those, and then you have your images, and then they're ready to drop into Replit. That makes sense? So that's basically what I did here. So I grabbed this bird. It's two separate images, and these were actually in one image together. So I had to download the entire image first, and then crop them to separate them. So I have my one bird here with the wings down, and then the bird with the wings up. Run them through Remove BG or Adobe Spark, and now they're ready to go. And then I just drop them in my image file and then use setInterval. And that's what you're going to be doing for the coding assignment. So again, you can use whatever theme you like. It's up to you. Be creative. And I believe I added the button in there too. So the button is also a requirement. So if you press the button, then the animation should stop. Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.